So we're here on Stairs Street in Halifax in the Hydrostone district in the north end of the city. And you might think if you passed by here that Stairs Street is named after a famous staircase or something like that, but it isn't. It's named after a famous Haligonian, or maybe an infamous Haligonian, William Grant Stairs. So William Grant Stairs was born in 1863 in Halifax to a wealthy family, John Stairs and Mary Morrow. They were in the shipping business and they had the ability to send William to the best schools. He went to Fort Massey Academy in the south end of Halifax, and then they sent him off to Edinburgh to go to boarding school. And after that he came back and he went to the Royal Military College in Kingston, Ontario. And he graduated as an engineer. And then he joined the Royal Engineers and ended up in Aldershot in Britain, where he was trained, and then he was sent around the Pacific doing survey work in New Zealand in the 1880s, which he actually didn't find as interesting as perhaps he thought he would. And he ends up back in England again in the early 1890s, looking for something interesting to do, some adventure, and reads in the paper that Henry Morton Stanley, a famous explorer at the time, had been putting a call out for some volunteers for a new expedition, the so-called Emin Pasha expedition. And this was supposed to be a trip to rescue a guy called Emin Pasha, who was the governor of the Equatoria province in Sudan. So William Grant Stairs wrote a letter to Henry Morton Stanley, and Stanley gets the letter and accepts Stairs into the expedition, which is surprising because Stairs had no military experience and no experience in Africa at all. But it seems that the letter was so concise and direct that Stanley decided that he would just choose him. So all of a sudden in 1890, William Grant Stairs is in Africa, in Zanzibar, in charge of hundreds of African porters and soldiers and some European lieutenants on an expedition up to Lake Tanganyika through now what we call Tanzania. And they find Emin Pasha and they rescue him, except it turns out Emin Pasha wanted to stay and didn't need to be rescued. And then they undertook a series of other expeditions to, quote, pacify the area that was under the rule, supposed rule, of the Congo Free State, which was a territory that was technically owned by King Leopold of Belgium. Now, it's at this point when we start to realize that Stairs psychologically is unstable, and he starts committing all sorts of atrocities on behalf of Stanley and Leopold. And there's lots of evidence to show that he was killing thieves who tried to steal things from his encampment, that he was ambushing villagers, chopping off people's hands, or ordering his soldiers to do so, and chopping off people's heads. And so to give you a sense of what he was thinking at the time, we have a passage from his journal that I'm going to read to you. It was most interesting, lying in the bush and watching the natives quietly at their day's work. Some women were pounding the bark of trees, preparing to make coarse native cloth. Others were making banana flour by pounding up dried bananas. Men we could see building huts and engaged in other such work, boys and girls running about, singing, crying, others playing instruments. All was as it was every day until our discharge of bullets, when the usual uproar and screaming of women took place. So this is just a description of one instance of the kind of things that Stanley and Stairs were involved in. So after this period, Stairs actually is sent by Henry Morton Stanley to the Katanga province of the Congo, which isn't actually a province yet. It's an independent kingdom called the Yeke kingdom, run by a warlord/king called Mziri. Now Mziri had married into the Luba royal family there, but he was also a wealthy trader. He was trading in copper, he was trading in slaves and guns, and he was powerful in that area. And Leopold had given the order to Stanley to make sure that Mziri signed a contract with the Congo Free State. So off went Stairs with an expedition. They find Mziri. Stairs initially greets him in a friendly manner, gives him a gift of a sword, and then Mziri gets a little suspicious and retreats to an armed compound, thinking that something funny is going to happen. And sure enough it does. Stairs sends in his lieutenant, a Belgian soldier with a bunch of African soldiers, to capture Mziri and have him sign one of these contracts. Well, Mziri doesn't want to be captured. He threatens the lieutenant with a sword, gets shot, and then the lieutenant is shot by some of Mziri's soldiers, and then there's a general melee, and the soldiers that Stairs sent managed to drag the lieutenant's body out as well as Mziri's body out and take them back to Stairs' encampment. So the lieutenant, who's Omar Bodson, a Belgian officer, dies. And Missouri dies. So what does Stairs do next? They bury Bodson and they chop off Missouri's head and put it up on a stake in front of the encampment saying, "Don't mess with us, we're now in charge of the Yeke kingdom." And then Stairs installs one of Missouri's sons as a kind of puppet leader in the area, and off he goes with a kerosene tin containing Missouri's head. And then heads down the river to Lake Tanganyika. He gets malaria, and Stairs actually dies in Africa. He's buried in Chindi, which is at the mouth of the Zambezi River in what's now Mozambique. He never comes back to England, he never comes back to Canada. But Henry Morton Stanley does, and he goes to Belgium and he goes to London, and he's celebrated as this hero who's conquered parts of Africa until a few months later, people figured out how he did it. And they start reporting about the violence, the atrocities, the murders, men, women, children, the mutilations and so on. And all of a sudden, Stanley isn't celebrated anymore, and he dies as sort of an infamous leader rather than a hero. So here we are again on Stairs Street, and you have to wonder, considering the history of William Grant Stairs and Henry Morton Stanley, whether we want a street named after him. In my opinion, I think it needs to be changed. And it's not just Stairs Street alone. One street down is Stanley Street, named after Henry Morton Stanley. And another street down is Columbus Street, which deserves another conversation. So I think it's important to know about William Grant Stairs in the context of his time and know his history, but we don't necessarily need to celebrate him by naming a street after him.